Dr. Annie Andrews is a South Carolina pediatrician and Democrat who, at the end of May, announced her decision to take on Lindsey Graham by posting a campaign launch video that quickly went viral. She joins me now to talk about that video and why Graham has to go. Annie, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So, before we even get into your decision to run against Lindsey Graham, one of the things that you say is you're a pediatrician, not a politician. So tell our audience about pediatrician Annie Andrews.
Yes, thank you so much. A pleasure to be here. So I actually decided to be a doctor when I was 4.5 years old. I told my preschool teacher that when I grow up, I want to be a doctor and a mommy with 3 kids. And I know that because my preschool teacher wrote it down and I drew a little picture next to it and my mom kept it. Now it's framed in my home office. So I was laser focused on this career of being a doctor. No idea where I got the idea from, but that's what I did. I'm a goal-oriented person. I achieved that goal. I spent about 15 years working in the Children's Hospital in the Low Country of South Carolina. And I really loved my job as a pediatrician in a children's hospital. But when you work at a children's hospital every day, you start to understand there's real systemic barriers that are impeding our children's ability to grow into their brightest possible versions of themselves. And if you don't work in a children's hospital or you don't work in a public school, then you might not understand how common it is to care for kids who are hungry, who don't know where their next meal is coming from, kids who are in the throes of a mental health crisis and their parents can't access mental health resources for them. Kids who heartbreakingly have to spend the night in the hospital room alone because their parents are juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And then what really got me off the sidelines was the children I'd cared for who had been shot. When I envisioned a career as a pediatrician, I thought I'd be taking care of kids with pneumonia and diabetes and asthma and seizures, and I do all of that, but I never thought I'd see so many children with bullet holes in them. And so after 15 years of understanding all these problems our kids are facing, I started to look for problem solvers in my state capital in Columbia, South Carolina. You won't be surprised to hear I didn't find very many folks fighting for kids there. So I got more and more involved in advocacy, started to understand the political process, realized I was more than qualified to run for office. And so that's what I did back in 2022 when I ran for Congress against Nancy Mace. And that's what led me to this moment, as you said, last month or in May, when I decided to run for the U.S. Senate against Lindsey Graham.
So talk about that great campaign launch video in which, among other things, you show Graham flip-flopping with examples of a clip of him railing against journalists who call Donald Trump a kook, followed by a clip of him calling Donald Trump a kook. As I said, this video went viral. Did that sort of pleasantly surprise you?
Well, interestingly, my launch video for my congressional race against Nancy similarly went viral. And I think it's a combination of things. I think, I'm not a traditional politician. I don't really consider myself a politician. I bring my lived experience as both a pediatrician and a mom to everything I do in the political world. And I am a very real person who talks like a real person to regular people. I'm not going to do this just to sound like every other Democratic politician. So I co-wrote this ad with my ad team, the same team I used back in my congressional race. We did a lot of back and forth. And I'm not going to do this to play by the rules, to play by the old playbook. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to try to unseat an entrenched DC politician like Lindsey Graham, I understand I'm going to have to do it my own way. And that's exactly what this launch video reflected. It's the frustration that we all fear, the anxiety we feel from this Trump administration. It's Lindsey Graham being the very epitome of what has gone wrong in the Republican Party. He has changed his position on nearly every issue in the 22 years he spent in the U.S. Senate. And I think people hear pediatrician and mom and they expect me to be one thing. And that's not exactly what I am. I opened the video by saying that Lindsey Graham is full of shit because he is. Why can't we say that? It's okay to say that. We are in this, urgent moment in this nation's history. We've got to try new things. I'm not going to do this and abandon who I am as a human being. And so that's what came through in the launch video. I'm so pleased it went viral because that's more eyes on my campaign and more ears listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth about the things that I care about.
Yeah, you mentioned that you ran against Nancy Mace, and obviously and unfortunately you lost, and now we have to, on a national level, deal with hearing her and seeing her repulsive statements and videos on what feels like a daily basis. And I was looking at Lindsey Graham's margins of victory. He won by 10 points in 2020, 15 in 2014, 15 in 2008, and 10 in 2002. So he's never even had an opponent come within single digits of him. How can you be different?
So first, it's 2026 is going to be unlike any election cycle that I have experienced in my lifetime. The chaos of the Trump administration, Lindsey Graham has enabled every step of this chaos, and people in South Carolina are feeling it. Whether it's the tariffs, on and off tariffs, and how that's impacting the South Carolina ports, whether it's how it's impacting South Carolina farmers and small business owners. Lindsey Graham just championed the bill to gut our nation's Medicaid program, which funds half of the births in South Carolina, at least 6 out of 10 nursing home beds, and is the largest insurer for children in my state. So people are feeling that direct connection to these failed policies to their daily lives. My job as a pediatrician in South Carolina has never been about red or blue, and I don't see politics that way either. And I know that sounds a little naive or Pollyanna, but everybody's ready for something different than what Lindsey Graham offer. And, this is a midterm election year. Trump is not on the ballot like he was in 2020 to save Lindsey Graham when Jamie Harrison ran against him back then. Also, that was COVID, so Jamie's team could not knock doors. We won't have that handicap this time. So this is just a totally different race than the last time Lindsey was on the ballot. And his approval rating is lower than it's ever been. It's 34% in South Carolina, which is 10 points lower than Donald Trump's.
Wow. I have a theory that South Carolinians keep sending him back to Washington to keep him out of South Carolina.
Listen,
it's just a theory.
I keep saying, let's send Lindsey home, but by no means is that an invitation to actually come back. I'd love for him to find a place to live, maybe in Florida.
Yeah, he really is a national laughingstock at this point. Republicans don't even respect him.
That's exactly right. I mean, he has a Republican challenger for this 2026 race of his. So he's going to have to spend all this money during the Republican election cycle because MAGA Republicans are unhappy with him. And of course, all Democrats are. And you just called him a national laughingstock. And that's exactly what he is. It's embarrassing to identify as someone from South Carolina because first, that means Nancy Mace, and second, that means Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
We deserve better. He's had these 22 years in the Senate to deliver for South Carolinians. And if you look on any important ranking, whether it's, maternal mortality or public education or infrastructure, South Carolina is failing and he has failed us. And my pitch to people who normally vote for Republicans is, let's just try something different for once. Give me 6 years. I promise every vote I will take will be in the best interest of South Carolina's children. And if you don't like what you see at the end of those 6 years, then just elect the next Republican who comes behind Lindsey Graham. But we can all agree that we don't need another term from Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, for sure. So as a doctor, I'm guessing that watching RFK Jr. and his cronies destroy our national health system is one of the big issues for you. Am I right?
Absolutely. I think that's really what was my tipping point. When I lost in 2022, I didn't necessarily plan to run again. Certainly didn't anticipate I'd be running for a statewide office like Senate. But it's everything that happened since Trump got inaugurated. Most importantly to me, the healthcare provider, the appointment of RFK Jr. to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. In our launch video, there was a cartoon brainworm that winked at the audience, which was one of my favorite parts. But yeah, this is a coordinated attack on our nation's healthcare system, whether we're talking about these devastating guts to the Medicaid program, cuts to Medicare, slashing NIH funding, just the fact that we now have a conspiracy theorist and grifter leading this department is doing untold damage to our healthcare system, our public health infrastructure, and the public's trust in healthcare providers. That is going to take us decades to recover from. Even if RFK Jr. retired today, it would take us decades to undo the damage he has already done. And he's only just getting started. So I see this as an incredibly urgent moment for healthcare providers like myself to get off the sidelines and run for office at every level. And we have to stop this madness now, or, who knows what could happen to healthcare in America.
Yeah, it really does feel almost like it's like an exponential issue. Like every week that RFK is in charge and Trump is president, we lose another couple of years of progress, or it's going to take us a couple more years to get back just to where we were before they started this whole thing.
I totally agree. And a lot of people, I think, are hearing this idea of Medicaid cuts, not really even understanding what the Medicaid program does in this country. It is the literal backbone of children's healthcare for sure in the US, and an incredibly important building block of our entire healthcare system. And when you take that much money out of any system, it's going to impact far more than the people it directly impacts. So as hospitals are looking at their bottom lines for hiring for the next year or two, they're making really tough decisions. Maybe a hospital was going to hire 10 new respiratory therapists, but now they're only going to be able to hire 2 because they're facing this huge Medicaid budget hole in coming years. And that means when you show up in the emergency department, even if you just fell and hurt your wrist, there's going to be fewer resources available to more patients who are sicker because they don't have access to primary care. So our emergency departments are going to be overrun. The wait times are going to be really expensive, and the hospitals have to pay for that care somehow. So if they have all these unfunded former Medicaid patients showing up to receive care, because you know what, people are still going to get sick and they're still going to get hurt. The hospitals have to pass that cost on to someone, and they're going to pass that cost off to private insurance companies, which means that those of us who have private insurance, our premiums are going to go up really fast and really high. And so this impacts everyone. You can't take this much money out of a system and expect the system to continue to function.
I feel like you just explained that better and more quickly than pretty much every national Democrat in office has done over the past bunch of months, which is both a compliment to you and sort of a railing against them, because the way you put it is perfect. And it should be so easy to explain this to people and how it's going to affect them. And I guess that's why we need more people like you.
That's why we need more. Thank you for that. And that's why we just need more people with lived experience in other professions. That's what the House was meant to be. That's what the Senate should be. Politicians shouldn't be a career choice. It should be something you do to serve your community, to solve problems, and then you go back to whatever your profession was. That's how I see it. I didn't daydream of being a member of Congress. That is not my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to solve the problems that I saw every day as a pediatrician in the Children's Hospital. I see being a senator a path to solve those problems, and that's why I'm doing this. Solve some problems and then go back to being a pediatrician, because I promise you, I guarantee that's a better job than being a member of the U.S.
So we're not going to find anything from your nursery school teacher that says you wanted to be a senator your whole life.
Absolutely not. If you talk to any of my college roommates, my childhood friends, even my friends from 10 years ago, they'd say, Annie is doing what? Because this was never part of my plan.
Yeah.
Really is what I saw every day in the hospital, that I gotta address these problems, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. South Carolina has, I think, some of the most restrictive reproductive rights laws in the country. I'm assuming and hoping that's a big issue for you.
Yes, absolutely. I was on the ballot in 2022 when Roe fell, and it became a central point of my campaign back then. And it will continue to be. Yes, we have essentially a total abortion ban, no abortions after 6 weeks in South Carolina. There were headlines just a couple days ago of a woman who suffered a miscarriage and was handcuffed and arrested. So it was one of the most anti-woman states that you can imagine. And I know as a doctor that abortion is just not a healthcare issue. It's also an economic equality issue. It's a human dignity issue. And when you rip away reproductive freedom from women in a state like South Carolina, not only is that morally bankrupt, but it also has incredible ripple effects on the economy. And we have Lindsey Graham, who honestly, if I had a list of everyone in America whose opinion I want to hear about women's reproductive health care, Lindsey Graham would be very close to the bottom of that list. I don't know why he feels compelled to open his mouth and talk about this issue at all, but he's done great damage to access to healthcare, to reproductive health care for women in South Carolina. And I plan to bring that up often on the campaign trail and hold him accountable for the damage that he has done.
But isn't he then going to say that you are radical and crazy?
Of course. And that's why we tried to get ahead of him on that by talking about that in the launch video. Look, I know what they're going to say. They're going to tell you that I'm radical and that I'm crazy, because that's what weak men do when they feel threatened by strong women. And in my case, strong women who have a background and expertise on these issues that they don't have. And, I want people to understand that I am not some, DC born and bred left-wing Democrat. I'm literally a pediatrician and a mom who just is trying to solve some problems. And I am proud to run as a Democrat because I see Democrats in Washington, D.C. fighting to protect Medicaid, fighting to pass a child tax credit to lift millions of American children out of poverty, fighting to pass common sense gun laws like background checks. I see Democrats fighting for South Carolina's kids and families, and that's why I'm proud to run as a Democrat. But by no means am I a career party person. I believe in term limits. I believe members of Congress shouldn't trade stocks. I'm not in this for myself. I'm in this for the people in South Carolina.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we talked about, which I guess are sort of the obvious things, our healthcare system, reproductive rights. What are the other big issues that you think are facing America right now?
It's really, I think about it, two additional issues. It's the chaos and corruption. The more I dug deeper into, why South Carolina's legislators weren't passing laws to benefit South Carolina's kids and families, I understood that the root of so much of this is corruption. Lindsey Graham doesn't actually care one way or the other about Medicaid. He just wants to cut the program from the budget so he can deliver tax cuts to his billionaire donors and the corporate PACs that fund his reelection campaign. So we've got to address these career politicians that honestly exist on both sides of the aisle who are not really in it for their constituents anymore. We've got to get the chaos and corruption out of our politics in Washington, D.C. And then the second thing is the thing I talk to families about every day I'm working in the children's hospital is affordability. Families whose wages have not kept up with the cost of living, who can't afford to live in the towns where they work. They don't know if they can put food on the table for their growing family, and prescription drug prices are out of control. Childcare costs are out of control. So as a party, we have to get back to letting voters know that we understand their problems, that we're there to listen, and then to work with them to identify solutions. And any Democrat who's running for office now who's not talking every day about affordability is not on a winning path.
Yeah, it's such a good point. You mentioned the corporate PAC money fueling Lindsey Graham. How much of that corporate PAC money will be fueling your campaign?
Exactly $0. I will not take
Okay,
any corporate PAC money.
that's fantastic. Are you worried though? Because Jamie Harrison raised, well, I think it was like a record for a senatorial campaign, and as we discussed earlier, he lost by 10 points. Are you worried about the funding? Are you worried about the fact that Graham has all these, his rich cronies that can basically fund attack ad after attack ad on you?
So I know that to be true. I know that tons of dark money will flow into this election once they start to see how much money that I'm raising. My campaign is powered by grassroots. In this first month of fundraising, and the end of this quarter, we had over 38,000 individual donors. Our average donation was $31. We're really breaking fundraising records for a challenging Democrat in the South right now. And so I feel confident that I can raise the resources necessary to run the kind of campaign we need to run against Lindsey Graham to send him home. I do understand that money in politics has got to go, but we can't change the rules until we start winning elections. So right now we have to play by their rules, which means I've learned how to be an effective fundraiser. And the difference between 2026 and 2020 when Jamie ran is two things. It's midterm versus presidential year. Democrats have a much easier time in South Carolina. Every time it's a midterm, Trump is not on the ballot to bail Lindsey out this time. And then we're not dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic in the way that Harrison campaign was. I got in this race 18 months before the general election because I know it's going to take that amount of time to raise the resources and to build the ground game necessary to get out the vote in South Carolina. But there are enough voters out there. South Carolina is not a red state. It's a non-voting state. We have to give voters something to believe in. We have to talk about what we will do for them, not just what we are against. And that's what I plan to do in every corner of the state of South Carolina over the next 17 months.
How can people get involved in your campaign?
Yeah, so they can go to drannieandrews.com to learn a little bit more about me. You can sign up there to volunteer, and you don't have to be a South Carolinian to volunteer. You can text bank and phone bank from anywhere. You can donate on the website. And as I said, this is a grassroots powered campaign. We do have donations from all 50 states, and I'm proud of that fact because everyone is tired of career corrupt politicians like Lindsey Graham. So even if you can only give $5, you can do that on the website, drannieandrews.com. And then please follow me on social media. I have a lot of fun there because I will not let them steal our joy. I'm Annie Andrews, MD on Instagram and formerly Twitter, and I'm easy to find everywhere. But please follow along and let's give people something to feel hopeful about in 2026.
Excellent. Annie, thank you so much for being here. And obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on this race. And we very, very much would like you to send Lindsey Graham not home, as you said, but just packing somewhere.
Somewhere else.
Thanks, Annie.
Thank
Yep.
you for having me.